Hello and welcome back to my Python for Beginners series. In this video we're going to be looking at lists. Now lists are basically what you might imagine from any other place that you've heard of a list. It is just a list of data. One of the main things you have to be aware of though is that every element in a list has to be the same data type. So this is an element. Lists are encased in square brackets like this, and this character there, that is one element, and then there's a comma, that's a second element, and then there's a comma and that's a third element. Just like to point out as a by the by that the last video I made used VS Code and Windows. This particular video is being recorded on a Linux machine, specifically Ubuntu, and I'm using PyCharm. I really want to show that it doesn't matter which of these IDEs you choose, they work predominantly the same way. There are differences in how they operate, but they will all let you run exactly the same code. Okay, so let's start by typing colors equals square brackets, quotes for the first element. I'm just going to type red, quotes for the second element, green. Once again, notice that it's filling in the double quotes for me with just a single type and puts the cursor conveniently in the middle. Just another little speed advantage with a proper IDE. Blue I said, didn't I? Okay, here we go. Now, as I said, these are all elements, and when we're looking at these elements, they all have an index number. Index numbers always start at 0, so I've extended this here. So we've got red, green, blue as your first. So red's 0, green's 1, blue's 2, and if we added more, we'd go 3, 4, 5, 6, and that could keep going for as long as you needed it to. Okay, so if I just add the rest of this code, so again, convenient print, we've already got the curly brackets, so all I need to do now is type the first character for colours, already there, square brackets, and I can just put a 0. Again, print colours, square brackets 1, print colours, square brackets 2. And if I run that code now, we've got the output red, green, blue. Okay, so what about other data types? Well, it's almost the same. I could add a list of integers, and incidentally, this name could be any name. It doesn't have to be the data type. I've just chosen that, so it's clear what it is. In fact, let's just update that to strings. Two, 5, 6, and -10. Floats, which remember are just decimal numbers. What if I done 2.5, -8.4, -9.1, and 7.8. And I've got 3 different lists of different data types. The order within a list is not relevant. Size order doesn't matter. Alphabetical order doesn't matter. Capitalization, things like that, they don't matter. And another way you can do this is you can fill a list with variables. For example, if I have 1 equals 5, number 2, 20, -3, -300, and number 4, what was it, 1000. Right, I could then make a numbers list, square brackets again, and what order did I do it in? Number 3, because actually it doesn't matter, again the order just doesn't matter, it's whatever order you want it in the list. Number 1, and again just note that I'm not actually typing these in, I'm just using the IDE and its suggestions to speed up my typing process. It also helps you avoid simple spelling mistakes, changing the case of the first character, something like that. And again, I could do exactly the same, or in fact, let's add a print statement in there. We've already seen accessing these elements individually, so this will print the entire list. And there we go. And it would work exactly the same way with strings. Not sure why I capitalised that, but actually it's not a bad thing because it shows you that it doesn't matter. Okay, so then we're just going to make a list, and I'm going to call the list names. I've got the square brackets. Name 4, name 3, name 2, name 1. I'm hoping you've noticed that unlike here, where I've got quotes, I don't have quotes this time. So even though this is a list of strings, because what I'm putting in is the variable that contains this value, I don't add the quotes, because if I did the quotes, it would do something different. I'm going to run that, I'm going to print that first and run it. Print names. So if I run that first, see, we've got them all. But now, watch what happens if I put a quotation in there. It treats it as a literal that we've just typed in, like in the previous example. Okay, so what have we got to do? Appending. All right, let's start there. So, appending items to a list. Let's start with a short list with a single string. I'm going to print names first, and then I'm going to do names.append, and we're going to do Sally, and then we're going to do another print names. Now this time I'm actually going to debug this. I'm going to step into it line by line. So I start here, I set names to Dan, so we can see we've got Dan has been assigned to that list of names. Do the print names, which if I show the console is there. Step in again. We can now see that Sally has been appended to names, so that's happened there, and then it will step in and we'll print the names again. So we've got Dan and Sally. Now, what happens if I want to remove that? Let's just do another example. So this time list names equals Sarah Dean and Kate. Again, I'm going to print the names so you can see it both ways in case you're not using a debugger where you can step in. So print names, names.remove. This will just remove the element Sarah from the list. Names and then print names. Again, I'm going to step in and debug it line by line, but if you run it without the debugging, it will give you the same eventual output. You can still see the stages. Show the console output, and I'll step in. So we've assigned these string values to the list names, printed them out, then we'll do the remove line. See, that's been removed from the list, and then we've got the final print statement that shows it in the console. Now, one thing you do need to be aware of is that this will only remove the first instance of that. So if I run this again now, got the assigned list. In fact, you can see a second place that PyCharm will show you this. I'm going to go to console. We've printed it. Removed Sarah. But look, this one is still here. So when we drop down again and print it, and we get exactly the same results. So just be aware that if you use this method, it does only remove the first instance it finds. Okay, so the second option we can do is to remove by index number or pop. So in this case, we're now going to a names.pop, and I'm going to choose index 1, so I'm going to remove Dan this time, or Dean even. Just make sure that this example matches the blog post. So if I debug this console, we start by assigning the strings to the list names, print them, do the pop. We can see that's gone already in the debug, and then we print. Finally, another one that we can do is a list clear. So names.clear. Again, step in, we're going to assign, create the variable or declare the variable, assign the values, strings, Sarah, Dean and Kate. We're going to print and output that to the console, which is here. We're going to clear them all. It's now an empty list, and then we're going to print the empty list. Okay, so we have covered creating a list or declaring a list. We've covered manually defining lists of strings, lists of integers, lists of floats. We've talked about adding variables into lists. We considered mixing and matching between explicitly declared and number type and variables within a list. We've covered the fact that we can only have a single data type in a list, so that they all have to be the floats, integers, strings, etc. We've covered appending names, which puts a new appending items to a list, which puts a new value or a new element onto the end of the list. We have covered removing an item from a list by value or content. We have covered removing items from a list by index number or pop. And we have covered removing all list elements. The other thing I want to possibly just go over once more is this dot notation. This will be covered much more as you go further into coding and you learn about object-oriented orientated code. Essentially, this list is something that's been defined, and the actions that we can do to a list are available under a dot. So if I come back down here and I do names dot, we can see that PyCharm is offering us all kinds of things we can do to this list, which gives you an idea that I've only covered a small amount of what you can do with the list in this video. It's aimed at beginners. I'm trying to get people started with Python and with some of the IDEs. So there's a lot more you can do to a list. And this is really another reason that I push using a proper IDE over something like Idle or something like Thonny. They're really good as a very, very first steps. Beyond that, you kind of have to do more learning to know what's available and lots of reading. Whereas if you're using a full IDE, you can see all these options. Okay, that about wraps up. Thank you very much for watching. Bye.